Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jessica and I'm going to be your moderator for today. So welcome to our Zoom attendees and also those who may be tuning in through Facebook. So today is another session of our Peer 71 Roadshows, where we will deep dive into one of the innovation opportunities with any of our 21 maritime corporates. And this year we have 17 innovation opportunities for SmartPort Challenge. So SmartPort Challenge, if you are new with us, is the annual innovation competition for startups to reimagine their solutions for the maritime sector. And it is the flagship event of Peer 71. So Peer 71 is jointly set up by MPA and NUS Enterprise, and TNB Ventures also helps with SmartPort Challenge. So for today, we are going to deep dive into the problem statement that is relating to consolidating and automating multiple ship data for port clearance and other purposes. And before we go in any further, I just want to remind our audience on Zoom that you can put in questions via the Zoom webinar Q&A function, or for those that are maybe on Facebook, feel free to type it into the chat and we will also respond accordingly. Just to start off, I want to introduce who I have here today. We have Tim and Zheng Yang, who are from Klaveness, and I'd like to introduce them, invite them to introduce themselves, a bit of what they do, their role, and also their organization.
Hi, thanks. Yep, Tim from Klaveness, actually from Klaveness Digital. We are a company that's part of the Klaveness group, who offer a system called Cargo Value to manage bulk material supply chains. But that's not really why I'm here. Why I'm here is because I've had a career in shipping and logistics and dealing with paperwork and getting handed sort of big chunks of paperwork from ships, masters and chief officers. And it's all a bit of a bird's nest. And yeah, we've recognized that that's still the case in Klaveness. Well, the ships that Klaveness sees, and we really want to help do something about this and make everybody's lives easier and reduce waste in shipping to make it more efficient and effective.
Thanks. Okay, Zheng Yang.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Zheng Yang. I'm currently an analyst with Zero Lab. Zero Lab is an initiative under the Klaveness group. So we are in charge of coming up with solutions to decarbonize sea shipping. And in the process, while I was looking through the different data sources and things like that, I do realize that it's quite a problematic situation, because we have all the data sources from different sources that are conflicting because of how all these manual errors have been resulted from human errors, or even systems that are incompatible. And therefore, this was a solution that this was a problem that has inspired this problem statement. Yeah.
Thanks. I love it that both of you seem to have a very personal stake in the problem statement and actually feeling the pain of it, which is great. So let's
Zheng Yang actually came up with this, by the way. Just saying.
Sorry?
When you sent me an email and I threw it out to the Klaveness organization and said, has anybody got any problems? Zheng Yang was the one who put up his hand.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Wonderful. Glad to have the man behind it on board with us today. It's great. So if we can start off with just giving a basic introduction of the problem statement, can you share a bit about just setting the stage? What is this, the current operations that you do? What are some of the processes? And a little bit about the data. Just some basic introduction first.
Okay, so personally for me, I'm looking at trying to monitor the emissions from ships. So I do look at the noon reports sent by the crew on that they send on a daily basis, and try to aggregate them, maybe to get the fuel consumption and the respective fuel emission based on what kind of fuel they're consuming. So, but then I do realize that when I'm trying to aggregate sources from different places, aggregate the data from different sources, you do get some manual errors that are due to human mistakes, because there are just too many forms that they're trying to fill. So for example, for one template, they might require the crew to fill, oh, what is the wind state that you're currently experiencing while sailing? So some of them will key in knots, some of them will key in Beaufort scale. So those are very drastically different scales. And then also things like, oh, if they have consumed a certain fuel during this voyage, but then because of manual errors, they might have accounted it for something else. So this makes accounting on the back end at the corporate level a bit difficult. And then that is, I was just only talking about one data source, but then you have various different sources due to the different enterprise systems that different operators use. So it is, yeah, it is a huge problem in that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you can share a little bit more about these data sources, or rather who is requesting for this information. So you mentioned emissions is one example, right? But what other kinds of info is there required, and who's the one requesting for it?
I can grab that. So firstly, to add to Jiang Yang's comments, data sources. The sources of this data can literally be a person walking down the stairs to the engine room, sounding a tank, writing down on a piece of paper what the reading is, giving it to somebody on the bridge, or radioing it to somebody on the bridge. Then in the evening or at a later stage, a different person who's taken over the shift from that previous person, walking down the stairs and sounding the tank and writing it down and relaying it to somebody on the bridge who may have relieved the other person from their shift as well. Handwritten information. So yeah, that's of course, in a more primitive sense, there are vessels that are fitted with monitoring devices and gauges and that. But yeah, in its simplest sense, that's what it is. So users of this information, where do we start? Okay, so a ship will be owned by one party, flagged, that is usually different to the flag state where it's flagged. It will usually be operated by a totally different party who trade it on a commercial basis, who may charter it to somebody else who runs it on a commercial basis as well. For example, the Klaveness fleet are at the dry bulk guys, they charter tonnage off the market. There'll be crewing. There might even be certain different companies that arrange the fuel. The fuel may be organized by a bunker trader that then works with an oil provider who may then work with another oil provider according to what country they're in or where they're taking fuel. There's the head charterers, who are the ones whose cargo is often on board, which will be traded by a broker or another trader or something. So there's quite a long line of people there. There's ship's agents who are in charge of taking care of a vessel's requirement in each port. They've got to report these fuel readings and often the emissions related. Locally, they're in charge of often ordering bunker barges or bunkers to be put on board the ship in port. So this information is useful to a lot of different parties, and it's passed down through a lot of different hands and lots of potential for numbers to be mixed up, or, you know, the Beaufort or knots thing. Someone just rounds that Beaufort scale up to the nearest 10, or sorry, the knots up to the nearest Beaufort scale. That can mean a wind is 6 knots higher than it actually was. So then the person on the next shift, maybe they round it down. So then you have like an 8 or 9 knot difference. So who uses this information? Lots and lots of people. And who has input into it? Lots and lots of people.
Wow, okay. So there's many people involved. I appreciate that you also explained a little bit about the roles of these different people in case there's an audience that are not so familiar with maritime sector. And the other question that I have would be, for this info that is required, what is the impetus for the requirement? Like, is it for monitoring purposes? Is it only when they're arriving at a port? Is it on a regular sort of basis, you know, just regularly during the course of the ship's journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's how much fuel ship's consuming. So I mean, first thing is it's for safety. That the ship needs to know that it has enough fuel to get to the next place where it can get fuel again. Of course, it's commercial. That fuel is rather expensive. So before that ship proceeds on a voyage, everybody involved needs to know how much that's going to cost. And as it's monitored as the ship is burning that fuel, that then has to be relayed to ensure that it's burning about the same amount of fuel that was promised when they signed the contract. Because if it's burning twice the amount of fuel, it's costing twice as much, which can upset some people and might mean the difference between a voyage being profitable or loss giving. And same with a trade, same with cargo. So yeah, that's two purposes. And the third, of course, is decarbonisation. If Zero Lab, for example, the part of Klaveness that Qingyang is part of, if they're going to their best efforts to decarbonise shipping, and the data they're getting is not correct, then of course, yeah, as they say, rubbish in, rubbish out. So yeah, I mean, those I guess are the main three, and of course the last one is becoming more and more important, and it will become more important as the years roll by and climate change becomes more and more evident. So then this reporting is going to need to be really, really on point. And at the moment, yeah, we don't have the data quality for that. Hence why we're here.
So yeah, great. So it's not just for port clearance and submitting of say customs documents, crew documents, things like that, but it's also throughout the entire voyage of the vessel to have regular inputs on the fuel consumption or various other aspects, I suppose. Could you give an example of some of the data types that are also needed throughout the voyage? So you have mentioned fuel, I think you mentioned speed. Yeah. Just
so I think with regards to the inputs, there is those that are concerned with weather. So things like wave height, significant waves, wind speed, wind direction. With regards to the more commercial side, the dates of arrival, dates of departure, how long have they been at sea, what are some of the fuel consumption at different points in time, what is the type of bunker consumed, and with regards to decarbonization, of course, it's fuel consumption and grades of fuel and the emission factors, or especially if they are entering certain more environmentally more sensitive zones, they can only burn a certain type of fuel. Yeah, and I think with regards to ship management and operations, also things that concern the crew, like how long did they rest before they started work again? Are they qualified with certain licenses to operate in, let's say, tight enclosed space and things like that. So these are the kind of information that is being passed on from one party to another party. But the thing is, without a common database per se, like what Tim has mentioned, so it's essentially one piece of paper trying to pass on from one person to another, and sometimes it get lost in the process, and sometimes you have to duplicate a few copies of this to pass to different people, but it's actually the same thing. But in the process of having to duplicate all this, you risk making mistakes and things like that.
And the data sources that you earlier mentioned, they are firstly from many different people, but also some of it is from equipment, right? Like if you were saying you need to do a sounding of the bunker. So some are equipment, some are people, some are documents that you might have regarding, say, crew, licenses and things like that. So I suppose it's also really a mix of like static and dynamic kind of data that's coming in. Is that accurate? Is that correct?
Yep. So the more automatic ones are usually weather and location. So you have the AIS, so it tells you where exactly the vessel is at each point in time. So that that's the more standardized data source, I would say. But for other things such as fuel consumption, it depends, because if a vessel is it's a bit older, it wouldn't really make sense for the owner to justify the investment in expensive equipment and sensors to measure the inflow. Yep. So yeah, like what you mentioned, there's the more high-tech version and there's the low-tech pieces of paper version.
And also just to add to that, yeah, the data inputs, cargo operations in many cases is still pen and paper. For example, a draft survey is literally somebody walking up to the side of the ship and seeing the plimsoll line, whereabouts it is, and the what marks the ship is loaded down to on the in the bow and the stern. That tells how much cargo is on board, and there's a whole calculation as to what they subtract the quantity of fuel on board, and they can tell how much cargo is loaded by the draft and how the vessel's trimmed. But that is literally somebody standing next to the ship going, yeah, okay, and then writing it. So that's not from a machine, that's from a human. A lot of ports also, well, most ports, they will need a statement of facts that's signed off by the master. The chief officer usually signs it off, and the ship's agent and some party from the charterer's side. Those, most of them I've seen are handwritten. At very best, some more advanced agents will keep a portable printer and they'll type them out and give it to them. But that operation usually takes place on the ship's deck or beside the ship, or maybe in on the bridge. But they need to be standing there looking outside to see what's happening. So yeah, input is sometimes from machine, but sometimes it's 3 or 4 people standing on a deck writing it down, and then taking a photo of it and sending it to somebody who then has to interpret people's handwriting, which was part of my job as a ship's agent. Probably the most challenging job.
So you can read all the doctor's notes really easily now. Interpreting handwriting. Okay, so yeah, that really does sound really complicated with different sources of input coming in and so many different kinds of data. Is there a baseline that is required at ports, and is there a lot of variation from port to port, or in terms of what is required? Is it the case that some ports require a lot more information, and there's sometimes you have to extract a lot more info? Yeah, or is it quite standardized?
Definitely, and a big thing with that is that a ship, by nature of maritime trade, is often going to or from. It starts in a place that has very little automation, and it ends up in another place that has a lot of automation. For example, cargoes that come from Brazil, grain cargoes, that is, it's where, but they obviously don't have a great deal of automation with counting, with tallying, with load management, that kind of thing. And it might be going to a place like South Korea, which is incredibly advanced. Okay, not by Singaporean standards, but it's much more advanced than Brazil. So getting those two to like talk to each other digitally is obviously incredibly tough. The ports in Brazil will have a completely different way of measuring cargo intake. Cargo loaded, whereas in South Korea, they'll have some completely different, probably much more advanced thing. And the other way around, if something is coming from parts of South Asia, and then it's going to the US, then again, you have a port that's loaded cargo and it's a lot of manual input, and their standards may be different. And then it goes past Singapore and ends up in Los Angeles, which could be one of the most advanced ports in the world, with an emission control area and with mandatory 48-hour reporting and lots of things that the load port may not have been familiar with. So that's a challenge. The sort of imbalance in levels of automation and digitalization in the different ports and the different requirements, of course.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you're currently seeking to overcome this problem, and some of the solutions that you might have tried? And can you share what are some of the shortcomings of these solutions?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest win that has been had is the ship's agents, like the Wilhelms and ship services. I mean, we as Klaveness could have the most amazing digital solution in the world, and Klaveness is known to be a pretty advanced shipping company in that sense. But Klaveness is only as good as the vessels they time charter and the ports that they visit. So Klaveness's influence on this is quite limited. The biggest wins have been, the big ships agency companies, I say, Wilhelms and Ship Services, S5, Inchcape. Those companies have tried to integrate these operations and these data flows. There's still a long way to go, though. Yeah, especially with these sorts of things. And I'm not actually that familiar with what those agent systems do. So, yeah.
So if you could describe what your ideal solution would be like, what would you say? I suppose it would be one that can integrate all these different data sources, ensure that the data is accurate and clean. You know, are there other features that you'd like to highlight?
Actually, for me, I was thinking a bit differently. Rather than integrating the different sources together on the front end, because I was thinking, I was quite inspired by how we use SingPass. You know, it's like you scan a QR code and then it links to your Trace Together, you links to your various governmental services. You don't have to create an account specifically for when you log on to each of your government service per se, because it's all linked to the raw info that is tagged to you, your ID number and things like that. So I was more thinking of something that could change the UI and UX of how people key in data rather than how they integrate on the back end, because I think it's very hard to get every shipping company or every stakeholder along this supply chain to use the same software or template that that anyone has come up with. And there'll be a lot of pushback because there are a lot of legacy systems that people are not willing to let go. But I was thinking if there's a more convenient way, there's a better user experience for the user to key in certain inputs on board, such that whichever stakeholder that requires this information, let's say example, you have this vessel has keyed in, okay, today the weather is such and such. So any stakeholder that requires the weather information access the IMO number, and they could get the same information without people passing on the information from one person to another. So that was something that I thought. Yeah.
Thanks, that's useful. Sorry, Tim, did you have something to add?
I actually just noticed there's a couple of questions from Matthew.
Yes.
The AIS information. So yeah, if you don't mind, can I quickly answer that?
Yes, absolutely.
So the AIS information, the signals and meteorological data, you need to calculate the wind speed, I guess. Okay, the main thing to note about AIS, especially the draft, is that is typed in by the ship's command. The only thing, as far as I know, that the AIS does is the vessel's position, and different insights can be drawn from how that vessel's position changes. But it's ETA to the next port, and what it's currently doing, that's typed in by a person on the bridge. So that draft that you see on the AIS, that will be from the person standing by the ship, writing it down. Maybe radioing or somehow communicating it to the bridge, but that is not an automated thing. Also on the vessel sensors, I mean, Yeah, sensors. I'm not a technical expert on this, but as far as I know, the sensors do help a lot, because then you at least have data that is coming from a mechanical source that's going into a machine, and then that leaves you the ability to integrate it with some kind of system. So the answer is yes. There's no harm at all in creating more low-cost sensors. There's nothing to be lost by that, because yeah, if every vessel, and I don't know, maybe there's like in kind of a fantasy world, if every ship had exactly the same sensors in exactly the same place, and there was a standard of these sensors, like you have to have X amount of sensors every percentage of the way along your plimsoll line, or along your along your marks or whatever, and then you have to have 6 on the propeller and 7 on the rudder, and if you don't have 7 on the rudder, and if they're not working, and port state control find out, your vessel's going to get arrested, and that sort of thing. I mean, if that happened, that would be great, because yeah, all this information would be at your fingertips. So yeah, more sensors, definitely.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Matthew, for your questions. So since we're on that, can you highlight what are some constraints that startups might need to keep in mind if they're developing a solution? So for example, I mean, sensors are good, but I suppose there could be a cost constraint, or is that not an issue? Are there certain other considerations they should bear in mind?
Yeah, I would imagine that it would be a cost constraint, especially for older vessels that people are not expecting to use for much longer. That is on the owner side, but I think in terms of let's say what some of the if some of the charterers charter in a vessel from an owner that doesn't care about providing such accurate information, for in that case, the owner wouldn't be incentivized to invest any money in such a sensor system, even though the charterer might require such information for reporting purposes. But some of these voyages might be a one-off voyage, so it doesn't it doesn't excite the charterer to pay such a cost to it's like if you take a Grab from your place to the office, but you have offered to pay to upgrade this certain part in that car, but you're only taking it once, but that you wouldn't do that. So that is one thing. Oh, and also one question from Matthew previously, just to add on with regards to the AIS signals, I think that is to me personally, that is what I think would be the most objective data that is available, because most ships have it. But then again, there are some limitations, such as from my experience, like the reception in the South China Sea is not that great, because there are too many ships going on there out of Singapore towards China. So yeah, that's also one of the limitations using AIS.
Okay, we have a question in the chat function as well. So building on the example that Chen Yang earlier shared on the UI UX, the question from Anna, I think, is, do you want such UX for the solution to provide IMO number and bridge or port access? So is it all the IMO information? Yeah, Anand, you want to elaborate further on your question? You can do so in the chat. Yeah, I don't know if Chen Yang has any comments to that.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand
it. Okay, no worries. Maybe then let's, in the meantime, while Anand clarifies his question a little more. So you've talked about what are some of the important considerations and what you're looking out for. Would you be able to share what is a good measure of success? So for startups that want to have a good sense of it, what is something, a measure of success for you, so that they can know what you're looking for?
Personally, I think because just to add on further to what I mentioned, because I don't think having a front end template to integrate data source would be useful, because there are just so many different kinds of ways the data comes in by. So I would feel that personally, from a success point of view, I would think that if you ask the crew, that have tried the new system, if they found it easier to use, I think that's already a success. Because I think as long as they find it easier to use, the chances of data being accurate would be higher, and in turn will be more usable for anyone down the line that it's using the same set of data. Because like what Tim has mentioned, rubbish in, rubbish out. So
okay, thank you. Okay, I will move on to my last question for the attendees, so feel free to put in your questions in the meanwhile. So the last question that I have is for finalists that would be in this program and going through our Accelerate and working with Klaveness, what can they expect in working with you on the pilot stage? So what kind of resources might Klaveness put in that our finalists can look forward to?
Yeah, so important to note here that this is us recognizing an industry-wide problem and basically putting out to the wider industry that whoever creates or whoever works on this solution is very likely to have quite a high demand. Of course, I can't guarantee that either. That's just comment from our observation. Yeah, for a shipping company to take this on, I mean, okay, what can we provide? We can provide consultations with people based on our experience. I'm sure we can provide AIS data. You know, we can provide as much support as we can in the knowledge and experience sense. In terms of actually creating something that's a commercial solution, such a solution for Klaveness would be exactly as Zheng Yang said, installing a new stereo and air conditioning system in a grab that you're taking from Raffles Place to Holland Village. It would be useful for the Klaveness vessels within the constraints of their trading. And it would rely on others having this as well. So yeah, it would really be working towards a solution that would be useful to the industry as a whole. And we're happy to help with that in terms of expertise and that kind of thing. Because yeah, if we do help and somebody does successfully create this, then yeah, we would benefit from it too. But got to think of it in an aggregate, wider industry sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it is an industry-wide problem, is what you're highlighting, and there could be many users, and someone who can solve this will probably be able to gain attention of many different customers, but also because you and Zheng Yang yourself are the ones who are, feel this pain and the problem, you can also help with your expertise in terms of refining the solution, I suppose.
They might be the Jack Ma of shipping. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. Yeah, okay. Zheng Yang, I think you wanted to respond to Anand's question. Is that right? Or if not, we can take it offline.
I think I'll take it offline because I wasn't quite following.
Sure, no worries. Yeah, maybe Anand, if you'd like to, or anyone else, you can write into us, and we can, Zheng Yang can respond accordingly from there. Okay. So if I can just summarize briefly. So the problem statement that we have today is on consolidating various sources of port data or data on board ships for port clearance and other purposes. It is a big problem that can, if there's errors and time wasted, it can lead to a lot of different problems later on, including safety issues for vessels or running out of fuel, things like that, costly problems. So this is also an industry-wide issue, and Klaveness is putting out this industry-wide problem statement, looking for solutions that can help with the integration and also that can provide insights using all this data that's generated, right? Tim or Zheng Yang, anything else to add to the summary? And then after which I think we can show the video, the animation video, because it is a good summary as well.
All okay from me.
Okay. Okay, then if that's all, maybe we can show the video first and before we end. Yeah. Just a minute. Here we go.
Marine crews are being asked to provide operators and ship management companies with increasing amounts of data, such as bunker consumption and emission levels, on a daily basis. Currently, ship masters and officers are already collecting and reporting data in various forms as requested by port authorities, bunker suppliers, charterers, owners, commercial managers, technical managers, and more. Some data, such as bunker types and consumption, vessel speed, cargo type and volume, are entered onto spreadsheets. Others, such as time and weather, are available digitally via AIS and weather routing services. Due to the multitude of documents to fill, many asking for repeated data in various formats, there is a high occurrence of human errors, leading to inaccurate insights. While installing sensors on board would automatically enable data collection, lack of connectivity at sea and the high installation costs deter such a solution. Klaveness Asia recognizes a wider industry demand for a comprehensive solution to consolidate and automate multiple ship data for port clearance, and importantly, create useful insights to improve voyages. Klaveness will offer expertise as well as their voyage information to test the effectiveness of the solution.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I hope that video was a good summary for everyone. Zheng Yang and Tim, we really want to thank you for your time joining us here and sharing your insights. And yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having us.
No, not at all. A pleasure. And okay, so I'll just wrap up. So on the slide now, you'll see the other innovation opportunities as well as the application deadline and application form. So for startups that are tuning in, do remember to submit your applications before the 10th of August, which is just a couple of weeks away. And if you are selected for the Accelerate program, you can look forward to masterclasses, networking sessions, mentorship that will help you to gain a better understanding of the maritime sector and also engage with potential clients. And at the end of it, startups in the Accelerate program will also be eligible for the MPA grant of up to $50,000. And we have 2 more roadshows. We are nearly done. So that's next week. And again, you can see them on screen. That's the 27th and 29th of July, same time, 4 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
See ya.